Ladies and gentlemen, this is TVP World. You're watching another edition of Break the Fake, where we debunk fake news and combat false narratives. I'm your host, Benjamin Lee, and let's get rolling. So we have been watching this war through every possible lens. Forecasts, expert panels, and endless interactive maps that track every road and tree line. But last month delivered a very different lesson. Sometimes you don't need troops to move a front line. One click of a mouse is enough. At least online. Sounds ridiculous, right? But unfortunately it is real, so here's what happened. According to Responsible Statecraft, an employee of the US-based Institute for the Study of War made unauthorized changes to an interactive map of military operations in Ukraine. Now, these maps are used by analysts, journalists, and also by users of the Polymarket betting platform. After the edit, Polymarket paid out bets tied to Myrnohrad in the Donetsk region. On November 15th, as Russia advanced towards the city, users are placing real-time bets on whether the occupiers would capture it. The total amount wagered was $1.3 million. Some of the boldest bets promised payouts of up to 33,000%. Las Vegas casinos are nervously smoking on the sidelines. And here's where it gets ugly. Myrnohrad did not fall, but the ISW map suddenly showed a key intersection as captured, with no confirmation from the battlefield. And that was enough. Polymarket treated it as a result and paid out real money. Later, the change quietly disappeared from the map. No explanation, no update from the ground. It was just gone, a ghost occupation. But one that padded gamblers' wallets. See, 2 days later, the ISW admitted that misleading and unauthorized changes had been made to the map without management approval. The next day, the name of the employee responsible for the daily maps disappeared from the Institute's website. According to sources, he was fired. Whether he personally benefited from the betting odds is unknown, but the coincidence is, let's say, uncomfortably precise. And some Polymarket users says this was not a one-off. They pointed to October 29th, when the ISW allegedly showed Russian control over the railway in Kupiansk before confirmation. Other mapping projects did not back it up, and fighting continued. Back then, it was blame on the fog of war. Now it looks more like the fog of personal interest. And this is the uncomfortable takeaway. Once war turns into charts, pixels, and betting odds, someone will try to bend reality. Just a little. One analyst, one map update, and for a moment, truth loses the profit. Myrnohrad survived in real life, but it fell inside a bookmaker's imagination. And if bets starts deciding outcomes faster than soldiers do, then someone has badly confused military analysts with a casino. Against the backdrop of falling living standards and growing budget deficits caused by the war in Ukraine, Vladimir Putin held a public economic meeting. On camera, he promised new benefits for state employees and pensioners. The setting was familiar. Serious faces, big words, and the suggestion that the state is firmly in control of everything that is very clearly out of control. So as always, the real purpose of these statements was not economics, but propaganda. The goal is to create the illusion of care. During these meetings, Putin performs his version of leadership, projecting authorities and calm while trying to soothe the population worried about falling incomes, raising energy prices, and the absence of any real prospects. It is less about solutions and more about reassurance, or at least the performance of it.
В последние годы мы добились опережающего роста доходов наименее обеспеченных граждан. И уровень бедности в России находится на рекордно низких значениях. Напомню, собственно, мы это хорошо знаем и помним, если в 2000 году доходы ниже прожиточного минимума имели 42 миллиона человек или 29% граждан, то по итогам прошлого года 7,2% или чуть более 10 миллионов человек.
But when you look at the actual results of these so-called social initiatives, the picture changes fast. Take Putin's new way of supporting families with children. It involves refunding part of the income tax paid at the end of the year. But with higher personal income tax, additional taxes, inflation, the effect is almost completely wiped out. Economists describe this as a classic roundabout profit. Money is taken first and partially returned so the state can announce that it is helping the people. Meanwhile, outside of Moscow, people are experiencing this care very differently. In the Sverdlovsk region, residents of Serov recorded an appeal to Putin, asking to be relocated from a dilapidated building. The house is infested with black mold and rats. Syphilis and tuberculosis are widespread there, and compare that with the capital, brightly lit, guarded, and constantly renovated. The rule is simple. The further you are from the Kremlin, the less you matter.
Здравствуйте, Владимир Владимирович. Мы, жители аварийных и предаварийных домов, проживающие Свердловская область, город Серов, обращаемся к вам с криком в душе и со слезами на глазах. Нас не слышат в нашем городе. Состояние домов приходит в непригодное для проживания не по вине жителей, а по вине бездействия управляющих компаний, надзорных органов за деятельностью управляющих компаний и со стороны администрации города Серова. То же самое бездействие. Дома признаются аварийными со скоростью света, а людей переселять некуда. Маневренный фонд просто в ужасном состоянии. В нем находиться даже опасно. В наших домах проживают дети-инвалиды, многодетные семьи, пенсионеры, люди с онкологией и хроническими заболеваниями, семьи участников специальной военной операции. Мы просто умоляем вас взять на контроль нашу проблему.
And so, behind the loud promises and grand language, Putin's real concern for Russians stop at propaganda and small cosmetic payments. Most people continue to live with low incomes, inflation, collapsing housing, and missing basic services. The system he has built over a quarter of a century is not designed to serve the population. It is designed to preserve power and finance war. And for millions of people in remote regions, that means being left alone with problems the state prefers not to see. Hungarian Prime Minister Viktor Orban is back on the stage with his favorite song, "Do Not Provoke Russia or It Will Take Offense." This time, the trigger is frozen Russian assets. According to Orban, any attempt to touch them is effectively a declaration of war on Russia. It sounds dramatic, especially if we quietly ignore that war is already happening, the one that Europe did not start.
Tehát az orosz vagyon, a befagyasztott orosz vagyonhoz való hozzápiszkálás, annak az eltulajdonítása, az egy hadüzenet. Olyat még sose láttam, hogy 200-300 milliárd eurónyi pénz elvétele egy országtól ne váltott volna ki valamilyen válaszlépéseket. Olyan nincs. Igazából 3 német viszi itt a primet, és ők vezetik vakvágányra szerintem, vagy viszik a falnak az uniót. A német kancellár, az Európai Parlament legnagyobb frakcióvezetője Weber úr, és Ursula von der Leyen, aki a bizottság elnökasszonya. És ők úgy gondolkodnak, hogy hát vagy megvan az orosz pénz, vagy nincs. És vagy véget ér a háború, vagy nem. És ha nem ér véget, akkor majd még kell pénz. Van az orosz pénz, és van a másik lehetőség, hogy a tagállamoktól gyűjtenek össze pénzeket. 135 milliárd eurót kér egyébként a 27 tagállamtól a bizottság elnökasszonya. Nagyszerű ajánlat, de mi ebben nem kívánunk. Inkább a többieknek átengedjük ezt a remek lehetőséget.
Orban warned that the seizure of 200 to 300 billion euros from Russia, quote, never goes unanswered. History, he said, remembers everything. At this point, clarification is needed. Which history exactly? Because history also remembers that Russia enjoys responding even without anyone seizing money, sometimes simply because its neighbors exist. Orban also complained that decisions about these assets are allegedly being made in violation of European law and without Hungary's consent. Here, he is perfectly consistent. When the EU talks about the rule of law, Orban does not hear it, and when sanctions against Russia are discussed, his hearing suddenly becomes flawless. Budapest is once again auditioning for the role of Moscow's advocate for European money. No robe, but plenty of pantos. Orban once again paints an apocalyptic picture. Europe seizes Russian assets, and then the showdown begins. What exactly that means is left vague. Presumably, it looks like all the previous Russian red lines, loudly announced, quietly crossed, and then urgently redrawn. These statements are not about law or history, they're about the familiar tactic of scaring, delaying, and buying time for the Kremlin. While some countries are looking for ways to make the aggressor pay for the war, Hungary is once again asking a different question. What will Russia think? And apparently that matters to Orban far more than the views of Ukraine, Europe, or international law. And with that, we conclude this edition of Break the Fake. But for more news, update, and commentary, please stay tuned to TVP World.